of you for allowing me to share my journey. In spring of 2013, I was a 12-month educator, and I had some regular blood work done, and the next thing I knew, I was hearing those three words: you have cancer. I was diagnosed with stage 2A colon cancer, and I was very fortunate in that diagnosis. I was able to, within the matter of about 2 months, undergo laparoscopic surgery, and within 10 days of the surgery, I was back to work. People heard I had cancer, and I don't know what they were expecting to find, but I was still me. 8 years later, in 2021, I was now retired, a full-time caregiver, and I heard those three words again. This time it was stage 3A endometrial cancer. Totally different. It was a total 180 from my first diagnosis. Within a matter of 3 months and lots of tests, I ended up at Mercy Hospital. I had a full hysterectomy, again laparoscopic. Within 36 hours, I was back in my living room in Princess Anne, which in and of itself still amazes me. And a totally different treatment, and I had totally different responsibilities now. The person I was caregiver to was my 90-year-old mother. And despite the fact there was a quick turnaround, it was the surgery in Baltimore, which involved logistics down here. It was chemo and radiation. And I started my chemo in June, and on December 15th, I had radiations sandwiched in between. And on December 15th, which is an incredible anniversary date for me, I rang the bell over at the Henson Center. And it was agreed upon in my circle of friends that that was the best Christmas gift anybody could ever ask for, and it was. Lots of changes in between, but I vividly remember when I was diagnosed in 2013, I had to let my supervisor know that I was going to be out. And he and I had been co-workers for years. And I'm sitting there, and out of somewhere, I don't know where, came the words, "This isn't my grandmother's cancer." My grandmother was diagnosed in 1968 with cancer, which pretty much meant a death sentence. She started the line that enabled me to be a third-generation cancer survivor. For her, this was a death sentence. Her treatments were archaic at best. It was devastating to her, and she had absolutely no quality of life for about 3 years. They are images that for a lot of us are really sort of emblazoned on our brains because we had family members of that generation. In 1994, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and it was, I know that myself and my family feared what he was going to go through because of my grandmother's diagnosis. And quickly we learned that it was a totally different creature, different treatment, different outcome. And it was with that knowledge and that growth between my grandmother and my father that I learned that, it may be chemo, but there's hope. And the understanding of the growth in treatment also helped my journey. It took a lot of that weight off of me. Were there challenges? Goodness, yes. Despite all the information that I got from the medical community, nothing prepares you for that morning after, 2 mornings after your first chemo treatment. I wanted a body cast because that had to be the only way I had to feel better. Aches and pains and everything else. Or that afternoon when you're taking a shower and you suddenly realize you have a handful of hair. That's changes in your senses, your sense of taste and smell, and your internal thermometer. Everybody who does the support group with me knows that I will sit there with the coat on in the wintertime. because, that's just part of it. But then there are the things that keep you humble and make you giggle. When I got home from Mercy, I was so happy to be home, and I slid into the recliner, pushed it back, and was just, living the good life until I had to get up. Now envision this body stuck in a recliner. It wasn't pretty, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful my only witnesses were my mother and my dog, and I don't think that was going to ever tell anybody. There were challenges beyond just getting through the treatments. You guys know this. The lack of energy, the constant appointments. I mean, I was living on the alarms on my phone for a while, and just that juggling that you do constantly if you have home responsibilities and things like that. I also became very dependent on the information that I found through Johns Hopkins, the Mayo Clinic, and the Cleveland Clinic, because that enabled me to go to my oncologist and be informed and have rational questions. And I'm also very fortunate that I have the same oncologist that I've had since 2013. Oh, wow. So, yeah, that's amazing. We all face these challenges at some level, and often we don't talk about it. And why don't we? Part of it is our fear, part of it is being overwhelmed, feeling alone, the what ifs, what if it comes back, what if it doesn't work, and our quality of life. And so many things our loved ones don't understand. They can be empathetic, but they're not in your body feeling what you're feeling. Emotional wellness has become, what's a good word, Robin, my mantra. It's great that we have biomedical treatments that cure us, but we have to consider our cure as holistic. The fears we go through, the stigma attached to mental health, whether it's in a support group or through a counseling or anything like that. Studies show that cancer survivors have a high rate of depression, anxiety, questioning self-worth, decreased cognitive function, and most of all, grief over losing life as we knew it. We're clinging to that old life. Yet, here we are celebrating life as we know it now. A cancer diagnosis is life-changing, not life-ending. We have to be advocates for not just ourselves, but for our co-survivors. There have been opportunities that I would have never expected, life changes and life lessons that are so incredibly eye-opening, and a sense of gratefulness that living here on the shore. I'm a native of Baltimore, and we love our Johns Hopkins, we can't help ourselves, but to have access to such incredible care here, and through our care here have access to Mercy and Hopkins and things like that. Along this journey, I have met amazing medical people. The people at the infusion center over at Tidal Health, and I'm going to just read this. Infusion staff, no matter how overwhelmed I was, listened and explained every step of the way. They have the gift of humanity and civility when their patients need it the most. I think back on some of the questions they answered, and I think to myself, I can't believe I asked that. But, we have the brightest patients. The difference, two diagnoses is two totally different situations. In 2013, I was very open about what was going on, and part of it was because of my work. In 2021, I was in denial. This cannot be happening again. They made a mistake, and no, they didn't. I had to juggle. I had to just figure out what I was going to do and take everyone else into consideration. And the opportunities that I have been afforded because of this. I've been very fortunate that both my primary care physician and my oncologist have been keenly aware of holistic healing. And Robin and I often laugh about that because my oncologist just kept pushing me to find a support group. I found, am I going to get it right, Survive and Thrive?
Close enough.
Okay, I knew I wasn't going to get it right. And Robin alluded to the fact that I did it twice. Well, the first time, you're just taking it all in. The second time you do it, you are more aware. And I think I ended up with a greater appreciation of the information and how to incorporate it into my daily life. The opportunity to interact with other survivors. You're not alone. You feel like you are sometimes because all you get is empathy or oh, I know somebody who, or, inevitably there's that one person who says, oh, so-and-so died of it and so. And, the longer the O gets, you know how gory that is going to be. That's such an incredible opportunity, but there's also that moment where you think you're looking in, you're looking in the rearview mirror of cancer. And a new person joins the survivors group who's going through treatment. And you're reminded of how raw the emotions are and how raw just the physical issues are that go with that. And you can't help but step back and want to hug them, Ruth, you do that. And you wish you could take the pain away from them. You really do. But it can be exhausting. This journey is exhausting. Someone in our group one day referred to herself as being in a dark hole. And the thing is, we can be there. But as a group, we have common ground, we have healing, celebration, and most of all, hope. Like I've said a couple times, I used to be a teacher. And my first year in the school system I retired from, I had 2 students who just sort of stood out. If you have children, teachers adopt kids. And, we usually let go of them when they graduate, but not in this case. These 2 students just were those kind of kids. And I've stayed in touch with them since they graduated. Well, I found out that about a year and a half ago now, maybe 2 years, they had both about the same time been diagnosed with cancer. Oh. Well, my first instinct was my kids cannot get cancer. That just doesn't happen, but it does. And they have been, I feel like we're the cancer cheerleaders some days, but just being able to listen to them and to hopefully be some support to them. It's an incredible life between people that I would have never expected. One was an incredible basketball player, and the other is now working on her doctorates in public health in Baltimore. And she said that the decision to work on this degree was because of her cancer diagnosis. So, there are wonderful things to come out on the other end of cancer. In closing, in my 13-year journey, I will not call them pearls of wisdom. I will just, things I need to share. One is a personal story. When I started losing my hair, I couldn't stand my head looking like the yard does when the grass starts coming up in the spring. So I went outside and I hung my head over the rail of the deck. And I started shaving my head. Well, I've got a 6-year-old beagle who thinks everything in life is fun. And I look, and he is chasing the wafts of hair as they blow away. Well, I'm like, how dare you? And then I thought, you know what? He just taught me a life lesson that at 70 I should have known. You take everything with some amount of joy. And if he could get joy out of chasing my hair, well, I can get joy out of being bald. And of course, this was all during COVID, so, you know, bald and a face mask was not a good look. This was words of wisdom from one of my former students. You don't know till you know. Everybody wants to be helpful. And they want to dare you and everything else. But until you're the one sitting on the other side of that doctor's desk, you don't know. That's one thing all of us share. And you know, that drive home after I found out the second time I had cancer was the longest drive. But I knew that I wasn't alone. Give yourself grace. That, you know, we want to beat ourselves up over what's going on. But in giving ourselves grace, we have to admit our limitations. But at the same time, we enjoy what we can still do, like we used to. And we celebrate. We have to celebrate our new skills and talents. Just within our support group, listening to the things that people, because of cancer, are getting involved in is so heartwarming. Practice life with grace and gratitude. You know, we cannot allow ourselves to stop thanking the people and the organizations that are on this journey with us. You know, we're a small community, but we are a community, and as cancer survivors, you know, it's a community we didn't choose to become part of, but we are so fortunate. I mean, if you just look across the table at the person across from you, you know, we're in this together. Please stop fixating on getting back to normal or the new normal. Think about your life. Your life is transition after transition. And the normal changes. It's a moving target. So just because you have cancer, you just find what is your happy spot. And finally, be the face of cancer. Everybody, or almost everybody in this room, is a cancer survivor. Just wipe out the images of cancer in the 1960s. You know, be that hopeful person who is so happy to be here that somebody catches your joy rather than the other way around. You know, it's our opportunity and our responsibility to bring cancer to the 21st century and not let it be all-encompassing as something totally morbid. I thank you for letting me share.